Good morning, freeze dryers. Welcome back to the Live Life Simple Kitchen. We're going to pick up on our freeze drying pantry series videos because I'm having so much fun doing this. And I think one of the most important freeze drying pantry ingredients that we can do are going to be eggs. And my egg video that I have is really one of the first videos that I ever did, probably one of the first 5 videos that I ever did when I first started YouTube. And it's aged okay, but we've learned a whole lot in the last 5 years, and I think it's time to do a refresh on freeze-dried eggs. And since that video has been made, we've learned a lot of things along the way, including the capacity of freeze dryers. We've learned how to make the eggs rehydrate the best. We learned how to not make them clumpy. And I also want to know how many eggs an extra large freeze dryer can do in one load. So if you don't know the answer to any of those questions, you better stick around for today's video. So there's some pretty good freeze-dried egg videos out there, but I've noticed that none of them really compile all of the information that we know about freeze-dried eggs into one video. So I'm going to try and do that today and try and get all of the knowledge that we have, at least up until now, 2023, into this one video. And a freeze-dried egg is such an important freeze-drying pantry ingredient because it can be used for a lot of different things. And because powdered freeze-dried eggs are so extremely expensive and the price just keeps going up every year, if you can do a whole bunch of these in one run, and at the end of this video, you'll have a good rehydration method so you can get the equivalent of 1 egg from the powder and use it for baking, use it for scrambling eggs, use it for whatever you're going to use it for. And the goal by the end of the video today is to get you an egg that you cannot tell the difference whether it's freeze-dried or not freeze-dried. So there are several things that we've learned over the years about eggs and how to freeze-dry them better, how to rehydrate them so they taste the best, how to not get them so they're clumpy or gritty when they're rehydrated. But one thing that we have not covered, as far as I know, no one else has covered, is how many eggs can fit in an XL tray, because the XL is relatively new at this point and it has a massive capacity. So let's figure out how many eggs an XL freeze dryer can hold. So if we do some quick math, an XL tray can hold 15 cups per tray. There's 6 trays and there's about 4 eggs in each cup. So if you take 4 times 15 cups, that's 4 eggs times 15 cups. That means it would hold 60 eggs per tray, times 6 trays is 360 eggs. That's a crazy amount of eggs. If you divide that by 12 for a dozen, that's 30 dozen eggs in one single load. Now, can it hold that much? We're gonna find out. And my first tip for eggs is going to be always do raw eggs. I've done raw and I've done cooked several different ways. I don't really like the cooked ones when they're rehydrated. They just don't really have the right texture. So I always do raw. But because you're doing raw, always make sure that you are taking into consideration that they're raw. You can spread salmonella, you can spread just different bacteria and things like that. So I would not recommend mixing your raw eggs with anything else. I would do just a load of only raw eggs. The second tip I have is that scrambled works the best. If you can do a high-powered blender, that works the best. Otherwise, if you're trying to do it by hand, that can become very tedious very quickly. So what I'm gonna do is crack enough eggs and mix them in the Vitamix to get to 7 cups. I'm gonna do that twice because I think 14 cups is probably more realistic. I don't want these to be all the way up to the brim of the freeze dryer tray. So there's 30 eggs in here. It's almost 7 cups. I think that they'll probably get a little bit bigger as I scramble them in the mixer. It's very important to do this if you want an even texture, if you want to skip that grittiness. And sometimes eggs have the tendency to get kind of coagulated and get lumpy when you rehydrate them. This is definitely going to help with that. Another thing that we've learned that's going to help with that is to add salt or sugar. And I know that sounds crazy, but it really helps with the eggs clumping together. I'm gonna add 2 to 3 teaspoons to 30 eggs. So you can do the math and figure out what you wanna add to whatever your size freeze dryer or whatever size load you're doing. And what that does is help the proteins from getting stuck together. Don't ask me why, I'm not a scientist, but it works. 2 to 3 teaspoons for 30 eggs is what I'm doing. If you were gonna do sugar, I know that sugar sounds kind of strange to do, but depending on what you're gonna use the eggs for, if you're gonna make them for to dip French toast or something in, the sugar might actually be good and it might actually enhance the flavor for French toast or something like that. I wouldn't recommend sugar if you're just gonna rehydrate as just a scrambled egg or an omelet, but salt, really, it adds to the flavor of eggs anyway. A lot of times if you're baking or you're just having scrambled eggs, a lot of times you're adding salt to them anyway. And 2 teaspoons is not really a crazy amount of salt. I don't even think you would notice the difference. If you have blood pressure problems or you know, you're salt sensitive, something like that, this is definitely something to take into consideration. But since we're doing so many eggs with that amount of salt, it's really probably not gonna make that big of a difference. So we're gonna lightly blend this. It's not going to take long for this all to get scrambled and mixed together. And my next tip for doing eggs, if you're not pre-freezing, pour the eggs into the tray while it's actually in the freeze dryer. Avoid as much mess as possible. So I would greatly benefit if I had parchment paper right now, and we actually just got it in inventory, but I don't have my hands on it yet. Otherwise, I would be using it right now. If you have an XL freeze dryer, make sure you go to freeze drying supplies because we do have XL parchment now. All right, so our bottom tray is full, but because we're doing so many eggs today, I kind of want to do some experimentation because this is a whole bunch of eggs and I don't know that I really need to freeze dry 6 loads of, 360 eggs each. This is highly aerated, if you want to call that. I ran them through the blender. They're really, really full of air. You can kind of see the bubbles. You can see how fluffy and how bubbly they are. I think on the next few, I'm going to try not to do as many. But even with the highly aerated ones, I was able to squeeze 48 eggs onto one tray. And that 48 eggs was 14 cups. I could probably get more on here. I don't know how much these are going to expand, especially with as bubbly as they are, they might expand a little bit more. I'm not pre-freezing also, sometimes that changes things. And I think that I don't want to go any higher. And I'm going to start this cooling just because this is going to take me a while to get all of these trays full. So I'm going to go crack, I don't know how many more 100 eggs, and I'll meet you back here. I'll give you the running total. All right, well that took a minute, but I learned a couple things along the way, as you would expect after cracking and blending several hundred eggs. So I have 48 eggs in each of these trays. The bottom 3, I blended quite a bit more than the top ones. The top ones I kind of learned if we just pulse them in the blender for 3 to 5 seconds, maybe a little bit longer on a low speed, they tend to turn out a little bit better. They also give you a little bit more room. So I think realistically, you could probably fit another 6 or maybe even more eggs into each one of these trays. So with 48 eggs in each tray times 6, that gives us almost 300 eggs, 24 dozen eggs, which is a crazy amount of eggs in one load. The amount of nutrition and just being able to nourish yourself for so many days in one load, just the ability to do that is pretty insane to me. But first I want to mention that this recipe, this updated recipe, along with more than 300 others, can be found at freezedryingcookbook.com. And if you don't want to do the subscription cookbook, we have a hard copy also available, as well as a freeze drying handbook. And we're working on a new cookbook with all of the updated recipes from the last several months that will be available as soon as we can get it out. And much of the information and updated tips and just new resources that we find that helped make videos like this and others can be found on our Facebook group or our MeWe group. It's just Retired at 40's freeze drying group if you want to join that. There is so much information on there. It's really almost overwhelming. So much so that if you use this magnifying glass on that group, it will help you search keywords and topics and things that you're looking for. And if you're curious about the freeze dryers that we use, we're using Harvest Right. You can find out all of the information and specs and pricing if you follow our affiliate link down in the description. If you make a purchase through that affiliate link, it greatly benefits the freeze drying community. It greatly benefits this YouTube channel, and it helps us do giveaways. It helps us provide new resources. It helps us make new resources. It also helps us make new products products for freeze drying because we're trying to streamline the freeze drying process from start to finish, and all those products can be found at freezedryingsupplies.com. And before we check on our freeze-dried eggs and do a cost breakdown, please take a minute to subscribe if you have not already. Live Life Simple, you can subscribe down in the corner here, or you can subscribe down below the video. And if you like the content that we're providing, please let us know by giving us a thumbs up. Well, I guess 24 dozen eggs takes just over 40 hours. Eggs look really good and no spillage, so that is good. Keep in mind, everything is raw, so clean out your freeze dryer completely when you're done if you've had spillage or anything like that. And really not a big difference between the ones that were blended really well and the ones that were just kind of pulsed for a few seconds. These ones are a little bit more yellow. They're a darker yellow, I guess. But you can definitely tell this is gonna be a finer powder. We'll see if it makes a difference when we rehydrate. And there's one last tip I'm gonna give you for eggs in order to get these to rehydrate the best. We're gonna try and avoid grit. We're gonna try and avoid clumpiness. We've already done several things to try and avoid that, but there's one last thing that we need to do. And that is running it through a food processor. Just a quick pulse, but we want that powder to be as fine as possible. The thing I love most about this is all of those eggs, every single one of them fit into 6 of these tiny little bags. There's 48 eggs in each of these bags. I love this because this really could sustain a family of 4, probably a couple months really. Now let's go rehydrate these somewhere fun and we'll make a little omelet. Today I'm gonna head down to our favorite spot on our property. It's a little picnic area and we can make a scrambled egg with the fine powder. The footage that you saw earlier in the video was actually with the coarse powder and it did well. I'm expecting the fine powder to do even better. All right, well, you can definitely tell the difference between the fine egg powder and the coarse egg powder. This was run through a food processor. It was also blended a lot better before we freeze dried. There's 4 tablespoons in here, so I'm gonna add 4 tablespoons of water. This should give us a basically 2 egg scramble, so good for 1 person. And I'm just gonna add my water right into the jar and then mix. So the formula for a perfect freeze-dried scrambled egg I have found to be 2 tablespoons of egg powder plus 2 tablespoons of water. You mix it thoroughly, you don't want any kind of chunks or anything in there, and then just fry it up scrambled just like you normally would. I forgot my oil, so hopefully I don't burn these too bad. You can always add onions, you can add peppers, mushrooms, all that stuff that you'd normally add to scrambled eggs. And if you want more of an omelet type, you can actually add just a hair more water and scramble it that way, and it'll give you a thinner consistency and it'll actually fold really nice. Well, texture-wise, the fine powder definitely does better than the coarse powder. Either one works really well actually, but the fine powder just makes a nicer scramble. I also noticed in the coarse eggs, the salt that we added, not overpowering. It was actually a really good amount. You could just barely taste it. It actually added to the flavor. And these also, I can taste it just a little bit, just enough to make it good. So there you go. I think with all the stuff that we've done today, all the precautionary measures, all the extra things that we've learned in the last few years, I think these are probably the best scrambled eggs, freeze-dried scrambled eggs that I've ever made. I'm gonna top mine with some salsa, finish my breakfast back here in the woods. Meantime, remember to live life simple. We'll catch you next week.